And I would imagine that you're finding yourselves studying this different maybe than you've ever studied before, maybe sometimes a little too in-depth and maybe more analytical than it is personal. You know, you'll find your groove. That's what I'm going to say. You're going to find your groove, and you're going to find that place that you hear God's voice and where you hear what God is saying to you, and hoping that the reflections that God has given me to share with you are insightful, that help you kind of see things different. I expect this week to be a little shorter than last week, so that's probably a woohoo for y'all. And the one thing I want to caution you with, because I'm working quite a ways ahead of you guys, and I get to doing such a simple thing in the day, just compare and contrast. What's the different words? And I'm so excited about just the process of it that I want to move on and do the next day right then. And I just want to challenge you not to do that. You'll be amazed at how much pondering and thought process and just absorbing goes between each day, just again in that simplicity of the study. And I really have to make myself stop sometimes and not do that. If you're not experiencing that, no problem. All right, so let's just move into this. We're on week 2, which is James chapter 1. Now we're doing verses 12 through 18. So I'm going to do it the same exact way. We're going to just kind of break this down. This one's a little bit more verse by verse even than the last one. So are we all ready for this? Okay, here we go. Verse 12. Blessed, happy, spiritually prosperous, favored by God, is the man who is steadfast under trial and perseveres when tempted. For when he has passed the test and been approved, he will receive the victor's crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. We have to, I believe, we have to come to this understanding of what blessed actually means from a very biblical standpoint, and not what the world thinks blessed means. And I think that's one of the greatest barriers that we have in the Western world, America specifically, where our idea of being blessed kind of revolves around us and our comfort, our existence here on this earth. And I really love that word steadfast, the man who is steadfast. It reminds me of just standing firm, holding my ground, regardless of what is charging at me. Because once I've learned to identify the testing, the trial, the temptation for what it actually is, and still stand fast, then we are approved by God and we pass the test, and our reward is the crown of life. It's just, I was reading it, and that one was always so interesting to me, is approval, test. I mean, we understand those things in today's world, but applying them to God, if someone has distorted that concept, then we kind of look at things a little bit different, and we live in fear and rather than expectation, if that makes sense. Let's move on to verse 13. It says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For temptation does not originate from God, but from our own flaws. For God cannot be tempted by what is evil, and he tempts no one." I think if we don't know God and his character experientially, which only comes through his word and a relationship with him, then God gets the blame for our failures. And it comes from statements from us like, well, why did God bring this? Or why did God allow this? Or if blank. And it's his fault that we've made those choices or gone down that road. It says, but if you truly know God, then your perspective of people, of places, of events, of occurrences, trials, tests, that begins to shift. Your mind makes this mental shift. And even what the enemy does, you know that even in the enemy's intentions for evil, God can turn around and make it good. And you have got to learn, we have got to learn to lean into that truth. And then you begin to see circumstances, trials, temptations, things that are coming at you that, like I said before, standing fast, holding your own, regardless of what is charging at you. Because when you know God, you know His intentions, you know His purposes for you, you may not like what's charging at you, but you can sit back and take a deep breath and go, okay, God's got this. Again, I'm not going to say you're going to like it, but you're going to know God's got it. All right, let's move on to verse 14. It says, but each one is tempted when he is dragged away, enticed, and baited to commit sin by his own worldly desire, lust, or passion. I think our desires are our own worst enemy. And the enemy does know us well. But stop giving him more power than he deserves. Begin to see the true power that can reside in you. I see too much emphasis, I think, sometimes put on Satan because there is a fine line between understanding who he is, realizing his hatred is real, and knowing his objective and his tactics. But our mission is to actually surrender our weaknesses to God and learn that He is our strength. It's a very upside down thought process. The enemy's real. He's deceptive. We're going to talk more about that. We get into more of that. But what's your identity? Who's your God? How big is your God? Because my God's pretty big. Like infinitely big, if that makes sense. Just something to think about. You know, I think we keep trying to fight all of these fights and all these battles on our own. When we were never meant to do that. And part of this lesson is equally about being authentic and real with yourself and identifying your areas that kind of send you spiraling. Is it gossip, food, money, sex, anger, gambling, profanity, envy, drugs, alcohol, addiction? I don't care what the addiction to. It could be reading books, Facebook, video games. And you got to, what is the enemy using against you? And where is God trying to grow you? Just think about that side of it. Because the enemy could be using something against you, but God could be trying to grow you. And again, that identification, I just said it, that identification, that quicker, like, this is what this is. Man, that becomes so powerful and so effective, and your maturity becomes exponential sometimes at that point. Why do we need to be very real with ourselves? Because desire plus opportunity results in sinful behavior. And sin leads to death. Spiritual death and physical death. And we live in mourning and fear of a physical death, when the real fear should actually be spiritual death. See, the love of God does not outweigh or negate the holy and justness of God. I should say the righteous justness of God. And we have a tendency to speak on love and think that's all we need to grasp. But that's not true. Let me read something to you. This is from Luke chapter 12. And it's verses 4 and 5. Jesus says, I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have nothing more that they can do. But I will point out to you whom you should fear. Fear the one who, after he has killed, has authority and power to hurl you into hell. Yes, I say to you, stand in great awe of God and fear him. When did having a great awe and fear become a negative? When did that get trampled on? I don't know. I mean, it's something I definitely think about, something he definitely has me pondering quite often. Let's read verse 15. It says, then when the illicit desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin has run its course, it gives birth to death. I think what I just want to remind you is that this letter was written to believers. These warnings are very real. They're for us, and not only are they real, but the consequences are just as real. I mean, I don't know about you, but the consequences I've suffered for some of my sins has been pretty great. These are just things that we've got to begin to process and think about. Let's read verse 16. It says, do not be misled, my brothers and sisters. Wow, such a simple verse, but talk about power. So don't be misled. Don't be deceived. Satan is known as the deceiver, and sometimes the biggest deception is not between good and evil, but between good and almost good. Because the Bible tells us that the enemy masquerades as an angel of light. So he's going to be handsome, it's going to be shiny, it's going to sound good, it's going to look good, you're going to want it. But I just want you to remember that 1 degree off of something is still off. I don't want to be 1 degree off. I want to be in. I want to know. And I want to be able to discern absolute truth, even if it hurts. And the fact of the matter is, our flesh does not like truth. We will constantly be wanting this, but surrendering this. If that makes sense, I hope it makes sense. I'm going to go to verse 17. It says, every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above. It comes down from the Father of lights, the creator and sustainer of the heavens, in whom there is no variation, no rising or setting or shadow cast by his turning, for he is perfect and never changes. I'm not going to lie, I geeked out a little bit on this, guys, so just going to share my geekness. Every good, perfect gift is from God. Dosis is the act of giving. This is the Greek word for the act of giving. It is the intention that motivates the giving. And the chain reaction to giving is receiving. So God is giving. He has the most amazing motive for giving. But we have to receive. Dorema is a gift. It's a bestowment. And perfect, teleios. And I'm probably butchering the Greek because I didn't have an opportunity to go listen to how it's pronounced. But perfect teleios, meaning it's having it, I love this one, it's having reached its end. It's complete, perfect, full grown, of full age, specifically of the completeness of Christian character. And if it's good, agathos, it's intrinsically good. Good in nature, good whether it is seen to be so or not. It describes what originates from God as an empowered by Him in their life through faith. Well, did God bring up a really good reminder to me on this, and that was on the story of Jonah. So I want to read just a small portion of Jonah. This was something God used for me in my life, and I experienced some pretty big storms, and I may have shared this, so if I have, I'm so sorry. But in the midst of those storms, man, it got heavy, it got hard, and so at the end of it, when I knew God was moving me, I still asked that question, okay, God, in this move, and I apologize if you hear this siren going off. It's they have a siren that goes off at noon, so you might actually hear it. But Jonah's story really spoke deep to me, because the one question I asked of God was, God, did you cause these storms, or did I let the enemy take me out? And not just one way, but it was like 7 times God took me to the story, and I was like, what? It was like this total revelation. So I just want to, now, so if you understand, God has asked Jonah to go deliver a message to Nineveh, right? Jonah did not think Nineveh deserved God's message, even though he loved God. And so he decided to grab a boat and go off in the opposite direction. So in other words, he wasn't going in the direction God wanted him to. So, and so the very first verse God gave me was this: but the Lord hurled a great wind toward the sea, and there was a violent tempest on the sea, so that the ship was about to break. Okay, that appears very bad. Can you imagine being in the middle of this hurricane and winds rolling around and storms coming down, and like this crew is afraid. They are terrified of what is happening. But I just want to fast forward to verse 12, because that's what I love. And verse 12 says, Jonah said to them, pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will calm for you. For I know it is because of me that this great storm has come upon you. Sometimes God will cause a great storm because you're going in the direction that He does not want you to go, and He needs to slap you in the face and get your attention. That just was amazing, because I'd been asking God, are you moving me? But even though I knew the answer, I was not being obedient to the answer. And wow, the storm that raged around that disobedience did not feel good, and it was not fun. Let's just put it that way. But you know, we have got to know that God never changes, that He is exactly who He says He is. And you know, we may shift with everything that blows our way, but He does not. And that's why we need to know all of God, not just the parts that we want to know, but all of Him. In the book Experiencing God, written by Henry and Richard Blackaby, great book, by the way, starting on page 325 in the appendix is a list of the names and titles and descriptions of God. There are 16 pages, one line after another, 38 per page, times 15, plus an additional 25 on page 16. That's 595 lines of description of who God is. Can you see the depth of this? If I researched one per day, it would take me, I think it's 16 years just to read it. Now imagine how many years it will take us. No, sorry, it will take me 1.5 years. That's my bad. Couldn't even read my own writing. 1.5 years to read it. Now imagine how many years it will take us to truly get to know all of Him. And that's if we are intentional. 595 lines, 365 days in a year. I keep talking about this experiential experience because you can have all the head knowledge in the world, know it word for word, be able to recite it word for word, but if you don't know him, and if he doesn't know you, we're in trouble. And you can't get to know somebody on 1 day a week, 1 hour a day, sitting in the middle of a sheet and listening to a gentleman or a woman speaking on stage, teaching you something, telling you something, and then you walk away and then pick it up again the next Sunday. It doesn't work that way. It wouldn't work that way with your marriage. It certainly wouldn't work that way if you had a baby. I mean, imagine if you had a baby and you only picked him up on Sunday. We have got to start looking at this relationship with God for being the perfect gift that it really is. And knowing that he's a perfect God, wanting the perfect end result, a complete, spiritually mature Christ follower who is so deeply in love with him that nothing can shake us. No storm, no weather, no lightning, no hurricane, nothing. We need to be growing in that assurance, that depth a little bit every single day, because the storms get bigger. We've got to know that. And just move on to verse 18. All right, verse 18. It was of his own will that he gave us birth as his children by the word of truth, so that we would be a kind of first fruits for his creatures, a prime example of what he created to be set apart for himself, sanctified, made holy for his divine purposes. He chose to create you. That means something. He wanted you here, right now, in this age. See, we were all intended to be set apart. To be set apart for his purposes. See, but each day we get to choose. Do we reciprocate back? Is our reaction one of love and gratitude and service? Or are we going about our day as if it means absolutely nothing? I hope that this gives you some things to ponder and think about. I also hope it puts an excitement and a yearning in your heart to know him more, because I know that's what it does for me. So I just want to say love and hugs. Thank you for joining me. Looking forward to week 3, and I will see you guys next week.